Welcome to the first video on the TRIPP News channel. I'm JThompson. So I figured that the best way to start off a political channel would be to do 9 axes and show what I believe in. Here, I'll go ahead and hold on. There we go. We're going to do the 45 questions because I tried doing the 216. I made it about halfway through and it was already at like an hour. So I'm going to try and keep it a little shorter. We have no right to militarily intervene in other nations. So if the military intervention has to do with our people, our citizens, our sovereignty, we should intervene. Okay, but if it's just intervening because we're the world police, I don't like that. So I generally disagree, but there are circumstances where it is unnecessary. Everyone should speak at least 2 languages. That's a great thing, but I don't think it should be mandatory. Local governments give each region good representation of their views. Not necessarily. The governments in Native American reservations have been an absolute disaster. They represent their people terribly. They have tried to implement socialist policies which have utterly failed. And that's the reason why, whether it's the poorest region in the country or the richest region in the country, if it's a Native American reservation, the conditions are generally terrible. It doesn't matter how much GDP. So I actually disagree with this. Alliances are important for protecting a nation. No. A nation usually needs military in order to survive. Yes. People should have the power to choose their leaders. Yeah, okay, so here's my thing. The 2 ideologies that have persisted throughout history for thousands of years are monarchy of some form, monarchism, and republicanism of some form. Not democracy, republicanism, republics. So half of me says yes, half of me says no. That's what I base things like this on. Because all these new communism, fascism, blah, blah, blah. Okay, those have existed for like a century. The historical, and they failed. They failed. Those are failed ideologies. So I generally just kind of ignore them. I think it's unrealistic to believe in failed ideologies. Anarchism as well. So half of me does say yes to this. It is necessary for the government to intervene in the economy to protect consumers. If it's to prevent something like a stock market crash, then that would generally be better than not doing anything. So I will agree. And that's just one example. But I do think that if the government is just pumping money into the system, printing bills and universal basic income and all this crap, no, I don't agree with that. Country must be sure to take all measures to enforce its law. All measures can be a slippery slope, as we've seen in Waco and Ruby Ridge. However, things like that are rare. The government and law enforcement are more than capable of abusing their power, but it doesn't happen that often. The media will tell you differently. Of course. The media is a major, major problem I have, by the way. Alright, where was I? It is better to maintain a balanced budget than to ensure welfare for all citizens. Now, I do agree that welfare is bad. Welfare is generally a net negative when it comes to the overall well-being of the country, and even the people in welfare programs, unless it's stuff like, if you're counting stuff like Medicaid. I think Medicaid is pretty useful, but when you have people receiving checks for being unemployed, and the checks they're receiving are greater than the ones they would be receiving if they were employed, that is a problem. That decreases jobs, that decreases economic activity, especially when businesses go under because they don't have enough employees. The employment thing isn't really as bad now as it used to be, like in 2008. But I do remember in 2008, I was a kid, but I remember watching the news like with my dad, and they would always be talking about the unemployment. And I think welfare definitely doesn't help that. So I do agree. When people have already suffered for technology to be developed, we should use that technology. Yeah, if the technology has been developed, no matter it, so if the suffering has already occurred and the technology exists because of the suffering, okay, I don't see a problem with using the technology if it's not going to hurt people. Why would you not? Just because people suffered through it, it's over. It's in the past. It was a terrible thing, yeah, but that's not a reason to not use a technology. So yeah, we should be more accepting to other cultures. So if we're I don't really agree with this acceptance stuff, okay? If we're talking on a global scale, global perspective, all right? I'm not going to accept some random pee-pee poo-poo tribe in the middle of the Indian Ocean, all right? Why would I? I don't even know who they are. Like, if it's in the borders of my country that I live in, then I will accept it as long as it's humane, all right? As long as it's not detrimental as a product of society. Did that even make sense? I don't know. But generally, I disagree with that. Children should be educated in religious values. Religious values? Absolutely. Religious values are much better than an absence of religious values. Does that necessarily mean they have to be religious or subscribe to a religion? No. But religious values are extremely beneficial to society. No authority should be left unquestioned. Yeah, I do agree with that. Questioning authority is generally a good thing, but the problem comes when people question the authority and refuse to listen to the answer, if that makes sense. So when we're just talking about questioning authority, I agree. You should question. You should question everything. But when you receive an answer to that question, you should not dismiss it unless it's factually incorrect. The general populace makes poor decisions. Yeah. Religion does not belong in government. Strongly agree. Genetic modification should be used rarely, if ever. I strongly disagree with that. We should put effort into getting a person on Mars in the near future. Oh, and with the GMOs thing, okay? If you eat corn, do you eat corn? Do you eat bananas? Congrats. You're eating GMOs. There are no such thing as non-GMO corn. There's no such thing as non-GMO plants that are made for consumption, okay? Unless you find it in the wild and pick it yourself, the chances are that it's 100% true that it's been genetically modified at some point in history. Agriculture as a whole is nothing but genetic modification. Breeding is genetic modification, okay? I have no problem with that. And honestly, these GMOs that are like the nuisance, like modifying the actual genes like in a lab and stuff. I don't see an issue with that either, okay? The animals might not live a good life, but we are on the road to being able to bypass the life factor, okay? And I think that would be a great way to solve world hunger. Moving on. We should put an effort into getting a person on Mars in the near future. Absolutely. It is important that the government follows the majority opinion even if it is wrong. No. See, majority rule is a problem unless it is a vast majority rule, okay? What we have in America right now is a majority rule by a margin of 2%. And that's based on popular vote, okay? There are 6 million, last I checked, more Democratic voters than there are Republican voters. That's 2%. Why is 2% of the country determining the outcome of an election for everyone? Or not determining the outcome of an election, but determining who is in control. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is simple majority rule is not practical because it's just going to create a division which could lead to conflict. And I don't agree with that. I think for a majority to rule, it should be a supermajority at least. It should be like 70%, not 50 or 51. But that's just my opinion in that, I guess. Oh, and if it's wrong, if the opinion's wrong, don't follow that. That's ridiculous. Nations should not maintain a military. Strongly disagree. Elections are a waste of resources? No. National government needs more power. There are instances where I would agree with this. However, there are also instances where the government could use less power. So I'm going to go neutral. People's freedom should have no limits. There should be limits to freedom. There are, you can't be running around raping people, So I do disagree with that. However, I do believe that things that are regulated that don't make sense to me, like why can't people collect rainwater? Are you forcing them to use city water? Why can't people grow their own food in some places? But so when it comes to things like you shouldn't force people to have to go to the grocery store and rely on farmers and truckers, because if the farmers or the truckers stop doing their job, that's a problem. That's a massive problem. And I know because of this election, there are tons of truckers out there that are going to start going on strike. And that's going to be a disaster. It's going to be an absolute disaster for everybody. And they're doing it because the Democrats are going to be in power. But you're also hurting your own people, your own Republican buddies. I don't get it. Just please do your job. I beg of you.